you the ag information you need. This is Market Talk, produced by the American Ag Radio Network. Now, here's your host, Jesse Allen.
And welcome into Market Talk, live from snowy, blizzardy Fargo, North Dakota here today. We're on location at the Northern Corn and Soybean Expo. Weather outside, not too great, but inside the Fargo Dome, having a great day here at the Expo, the Northern Corn and Soybean Expo. I'm your host, Jesse Allen. Thanks for joining us for Market Talk here today. Find us online, markettalkag.com. You can find all of our social media links there, all of our ways to stream the show, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so many more ways. The YouTube channel, you can watch the video version of the show. No video version today. It's audio only on our YouTube side, as well as we are on location here at the Expo. No markets today. President's Day. Market trade is closed. A lot of things swirling around geopolitically, wondering what's happening with Russia, Ukraine. Obviously, South American weather continues to be a driver, especially in the soybean market. Watching inflation concerns, so many things going on in the market trade that we really have to keep our eyes on. It'll be interesting to see what the markets do here when we open up in the Globex session overnight tonight into Tuesday morning. As we get back to normal trade, we'll see what the markets do, how they react to all the headlines we've seen here over the weekend. So a lot of things to consider, a lot of things to watch in the market trade. Today, though, having a few different conversations with no markets. Coming up in just a minute, we're going to be talking with Josh Linville of StoneX. He is their fertilizer expert, and obviously fertilizer prices, availability, that is a big topic for farmers here as we get ready for spring planting 2022. So we're going to be talking to Josh here in just a minute about that. Also coming up here on the show today, we're going to talk biodiesel and renewable diesel and more with Scott Fenwick. He is the technical director with Clean Fuels Alliance America. He used to be the National Biodiesel Board, now Clean Fuels Alliance America. We're going to talk to him coming up here in just a little bit. Also going to talk with Neil Caskey, the Communications Vice President for the National Corn Growers Association, in just a little bit. And we're also going to look at cybersecurity. That is another hot topic. We've seen a lot of that in the news around agriculture the last year. We're going to talk with Sarah Engstrom with CHS. So a jam-packed market talk here today, kind of drifting a little bit away from the markets, but talking about some very important topics for you and your operation here live from Fargo today at the Northern Corn and Soybean Expo. And joining us live here today at the Northern Corn and Soybean Expo at the Fargo Dome in Fargo, North Dakota, Josh Linville with StoneX, talking fertilizer. Josh, it's great to see you. How are you?
Good. Long time no see.
Yeah, I know. Long time no see. Been a couple months. I mean, I know we've chatted a little bit on Twitter and whatnot between here and there, but always great to catch up with you. And, you know, on a day like today, President's Day, no markets, gives us an opportunity to talk about different things that are impacting the markets. And, of course, fertilizer, big topic. You know, since the last time we talked, we've seen prices continue to go up and up. But I know you're part of taping a U.S. Farm Report this morning, and you made an interesting point about how the clock's kind of ticking to get fertilizer in from overseas. I mean, let's start there. I mean, if guys are thinking about changing something up and trying to get certain fertilizer in, that clock has pretty much almost run out on them, hasn't it?
It has. And I don't want to sit here. I'm not trying to scare somebody into doing something. We've got very good supplies in place. And I'm still not buying into the whole, well, we're not going to have enough to plant the crop. I don't believe that's the case. But if we do see major shifts, let's say we see a major switch from anhydrous to urea, that's where we start getting into problems. And the logistics we were talking about is a lot of our urea imports, for example, come from the Middle East. If you have a ship ready to load today and they load it and they send it, it's 30 days to get it from there to the Gulf of Mexico. Well, then you have to unload into barges, and then you got to move that barge up the river system, and then you've got to get it through a terminal and onto a truck or a rail car into its destination. When you start thinking about it from start to finish, that is a 75-day, give or take, process. And you look at the calendar real quick, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, so we're February, so we're March, April, wow, we're May 1. Spring's almost over.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and that's on top of prices. And I mean, you know, we continue to see prices go up and up, making new highs, and it just I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding prices and where they could go. I mean, what's your general thoughts on just where everything stands price-wise right now?
Well, I know this is going to be very unpopular, but when you look at where all the grain prices are, I'm struggling to see prices coming down significantly. You look at the phosphate values; those have actually been jumping. I think over the last several weeks, we're up almost $100 a ton. Urea has been rebounding. UAN anhydrous prices have stayed steady at very, very high levels. There's some concern about potash now, of course. I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's no way prices come down, because that would be just out and out lying. But there are a lot more avenues right now that prices hold or push higher through spring than what there are dropping.
Now, of course, we talk spring planting. There is a lot of discussion about the acreage battle. I mean, we think about even up here in the Dakotas, are we going to see spring wheat? Are we going to see soybeans? Are we going to see corn? Just where prices are at. Are you still hearing from a lot of farmers that they're thinking about changing what they're going to plant here in just a matter of a couple of weeks, months ahead?
Every single day. And as the grain values move, well, so do those planting intentions. And it's funny you say even here in North Dakota or in the Dakotas. I actually spend a lot more time looking at this area, the Northern Plains, because a lot of people look at the farm values in the Corn Belt and they think, oh, that's going to drive it. Well, realistically, it's called the Corn Belt for a reason. They plant corn. That doesn't change year to year to year. However, your Northern Plains and your Southern Plains, that's where your switch acres really start to occur. And the Dakotas are going to be extremely important on telling that story of what those acres are ultimately going to be. I'm focused more here than I am on like Iowa, Illinois. Not that they're not important, but I don't see them switching like I do here.
Do you think we see more soybeans versus spring wheat here in the Northern Plains, just with where prices are and the fact that it does take a good amount of fertilizer for that wheat? And
that's the thing. I guess if I put myself in the shoes of a farmer up here and I look at the inputs and all the risk and everything else that's in there, I'm probably leaning towards soybeans today. Things will change 100 times between now and actually putting it in the ground, but right now that's what I would say.
And that's a lot to take in and consider. And like you said, things are going to change here as we go through the next 30, 60 days, 90 days even. It's all going to depend on what sets up for spring weather. I mean, we look at moisture here. And it's also probably going to depend, too, who has already locked in fertilizer last fall, who's already fall applied in certain areas. I think that's going to play a role as well. And I've heard a lot of talk that even with soybeans, $16 soybeans, there's still a lot of talk of corn throughout much of the country and even into some of the more fringe corn acres, so to speak.
Yeah, and so the fall anhydrous run, and once you put the nitrogen in the ground, you are going to go corn because you'll lose it otherwise. But we had probably one of the, if not the best fall anhydrous run that we've seen on history. That has set a lot of acres already down that corn path. But a lot of people think, well, we had a great fall. That means there's nothing left for spring. We're forecasting, we believe the fall was around 2.3, 2.4 million ton applied. We're still expecting 1.75 million to get applied in the spring. So that's a lot of wiggle room there that we could still see.
Very, very true. I want to talk as well the geopolitical issues and how that's impacting fertilizer. I know we've heard over the weekend some issues with Belarus and potash, and obviously the Russia-Ukraine situation is ever-changing, and wondering about what that's going to do for different fertilizers and resources out of that region. What's your take on what's going on over there, and also the situation with potash in Belarus?
So starting with the Russia-Ukraine situation, the thing that we kind of lose sight of is how important Russia is to the world market. They are a major exporter of nitrogen, phosphate, and potash. All three of the majors, they export a significant amount, and probably anywhere from 10 to 30% of the global export trade comes from Russia. So if we get into a situation where they invade the Ukraine and we actually get into a fight with them and we start shutting down their exports, whether that be by sanction or by force, we are cutting out a significant portion of the export flow. So that, I don't have to go into the details of what that means for the pricing. The Belarus potash situation has been interesting. So Belarus was kind of the one that kicked it off over there. The whole political situation, a lot of sanctions placed on them. Well, Lithuania is very important to them. They ship a lot of their potash through Lithuania to their ports to ship it internationally. Well, Lithuania currently came out and said, hey, as of I think it was February 1st, we're not going to allow you to ship your product through here. We're going to start punishing you. Well, if you can't move your product to the water system, you can't export it onto vessels. And they've claimed force majeure and said, sorry, there's nothing we can do about this. And so it doesn't seem like a big thing, but when you start to dial into it, Belarus accounts for 13% of the global operating capacity for potash. That's not a small number.
Well, and of course, on top of all that, supply chain issues are still out there now. We haven't heard, I'd say, as much about that recently as things have started to improve, but obviously still getting certain products to the U.S. or to other parts of the world is still a big issue as well.
It is. Vessel freight on the bulk side is still very, very difficult. We're seeing very high prices. And then you start getting into the U.S. market itself. Rail service has been declining for a while. You're starting to hear a lot of people say how slow that's been. Finding trucks has been very, very difficult. It's going to be an uphill battle.
Very, very true. Josh, any other final thoughts you have for us here today?
No, the biggest one I keep trying to repeat, and I think we actually talked about this last time, it's just, there's a lot of emotion pent up in these markets. There's a lot of reason to be angry. Don't let anger make your decision. I've made a lot of angry decisions in my life. None of them have played out very, very well. Be angry, do all the things. But when it comes down to it, sit down with your numbers and just take a good, hard, rational look at it and make the best decision for you.
Josh, appreciate the time. As always, good to catch up with you. I'm sure we'll talk again real soon. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
And again, that's Josh Linville with StoneX joining us here today on Market Talk as we continue with our program here on this Monday live from the Northern Quarter Soybean Expo in Fargo. Joining us now, Neil Caskey with the National Corn Growers Association. Neil, great to catch up with you, sir. How are you?
I'm good. I'm cold. I'm from St. Louis, and I have never in my entire life experienced weather quite like this. But Fargo definitely delivered in the cold weather.
Delivered
area.
a nice blizzard for you, some temps below, wind chills below zero. Hopefully you brought a heavy enough jacket and maybe some gloves and a hat.
More layers of clothes than is necessary for an overnight trip, that's for sure.
Well, Neil, beyond the weather, we got plenty of things to talk about. And I think probably the biggest thing at the top of farmers' minds here as we get into the spring is probably the fertilizer situation.
For sure.
And I just talked to Josh Linville with StoneX, and I'd love your kind of thoughts on just where fertilizer is at and how that's going to impact our corn farmers here this spring.
Yeah, if it's kind of hard to believe when you look outside here in Fargo that planting is literally around the corner, and will be seed will be going in the ground in some parts of the U.S. But you talk to any corn grower right now, and the hottest topic, the one thing that they're talking about are, I guess, the category of inputs. I mean, obviously that's top of mind, but specifically fertilizers, and so they're paying just 200, 300. % more in some cases than they were in previous years, and that has them pretty concerned about the crop. Obviously, we've seen the price of corn is a little bit higher, but inputs are eating away at any potential margin that they might have there. And so fertilizers, that's the number one issue that we're dealing with right now for growers, specifically the tariffs. So we understand that there are a lot of supply chain issues and weather issues and just problems that the entire economy is dealing with. Those are real, and we understand those as best as we can. What we don't understand is why, a company like CF Industry, why a company like Mosaic would make that bad situation worse by imposing tariffs on top of it all.
Well, and you think, if farmers didn't didn't get things paid for even in the fall when prices were already, rather high, I mean, what's that going to do as we get here to the spring? And you mentioned, yes, corn prices are going up. We're getting around $6 corn, but cost of inputs going up too. And that's it's really going to be tough for farmers in their bottom line, I would have to think, here as we get into 2022.
For sure, and we obviously don't know what kind of impact, if there'll be any at all, on the farm gate. But but that's something that we're watching closely, and we are in communication with both companies. We have specifically asked them to withdraw their petitions. They have petitioned the federal government, specifically the International Trade Commission, to impose tariffs on imports of their respective products. That doesn't make sense to us right now, on top of just this massive supply chain problem, the weather issues from last year. Why you would want to impose tariffs on top of all that is just really hard for us to understand. We've invited them to help explain why tariffs, will help make supply of their products more, how they'll increase supply, and how that will, how tariffs will bring prices down of those products. They failed to make that case, at least as of February 21st, they have.
Well, I know another issue that corn growers are watching very closely is ethanol, the issues surrounding the RFS currently. And there's a lot of noise, I feel like, around what is going on with the administration, with EPA, what they're looking at doing. I know our congressmen and women, senators are really, focused on this issue as well, farm country, but I know corn growers are as well. Just talk about where this RFS situation stands and some of the things that corn growers are trying to do to help it.
Sure. We believe that the future for ethanol is indeed bright. If you watched the Super Bowl a week ago, I think like every other commercial, there were some good commercials too, but every other commercial, had some sort of a celebrity promoting electric vehicles and the promise of combating climate change. And so, that's that's EVs are coming. We know that, and we know that they can help address climate change, but that's not going to happen for 20 or 30 years at best. And so for a government that says it's really serious about doing something to combat climate change, when it comes to transportation fuel, I can't think of a better option than ethanol. Ethanol is a product that can combat climate change today. And so we had a study a year ago from Harvard and Tufts. Those are two pretty highly respected institutions that showed that ethanol is about 40% better, 40 to 50% better than conventional fuel when it comes to climate, carbon reductions. And so we got a good product. We believe that the future's bright. We have legislation right now in front of the U.S. House of Representatives, the Next Generation Fuels Act, that will establish an octane standard that will allow us to put more ethanol in our tanks and get serious about doing something with climate change.
Well, of course, climate change is a big thing, and obviously, for our farmers here in the Midwest, a lot of them growing that great corn crop year over year, and just having higher ethanol blends is key. And I know there's been a lot of concern over E15 and whatnot, but with that legislation in Congress, I feel like that would be a really big step in helping get year-round E15 and getting us on that path forward as well.
Absolutely, and I think we're up to 20-something co-sponsors, bipartisan support for ethanol. Which and these days, if you can get bipartisan support for anything, it's a small miracle. So ethanol is one of the issues that appears to bring Democrats and Republicans together. They understand what it means to rural America. They understand what it means to the farmer. They also understand what it means to the consumer. It is it's a very affordable product, and so it helps bring the price of gas down. And at the end of the day, again, if we're serious about climate change and addressing it, there is no better solution right now than ethanol.
And not only national level, but there's a lot of state policy that is going on currently surrounding ethanol. I think of some of the states in the Corn Belt, Iowa, Missouri, et cetera, Minnesota. There's a lot of legislation going on at the state level that's also favoring and looking to help the ethanol industry.
That's right. So we have state associations that are working to expand demand for ethanol and other products, and they're making great progress. And so when you combine that national and state effort, that's when we talk about the future being bright for ethanol. It's all that stuff.
Neil, before we run out of time, any other big topics or big things that the National Corn Growers Association is really focused on here in this first part of 2022?
I guess I'll answer it this way. It's kind of what we got done towards the end of the year. I know that there was the President's Build Back Better plan, and they were looking at financing some of those provisions through higher taxes and eliminating the stepped up basis provision that a lot of farmers take advantage of. And so we that fight is still kind of ongoing. We don't know what will happen to that bill, but we are pleased that no version that we saw that kind of made it had any increase in tax that would have eliminated that stepped up basis provision. So we were pleased to have potentially resolved that, but I know that until it's completely done, it's going to remain a priority into the rest of 2022 as well.
And I'm glad you brought that up. A great point to end on. I know a lot of farmers very concerned about some of those tax provisions, the elimination of stepped-up basis. Of course, it's tax season right now, so a lot of things to watch and consider. And I know, of course, the corn growers, you guys will continue to fight for our corn farmers here across the country. And Neil, I appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us here today at the Northern Quarter at Soybean Expo, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I appreciate the time, and we do fight hard for our growers, and that's what they expect of us, and hopefully we're able to deliver more successes in a year from now.
That's Neil Caskey with the National Corn Growers Association joining us here today on Market Talk. Joining us now, we keep the guests rolling right along here on the show. Scott Fenwick, Technical Director with Clean Fuels Alliance America. Scott, thanks for taking the time to join us here today on Market Talk.
Thank you, Jesse.
I appreciate the time. Let's dive right in. Obviously, biodiesel, renewable diesel, a lot of excitement around these products here throughout the country, throughout agriculture. And, you know, I just talked to one of the guys behind the Castleton crush plant as well. And I mean, you know, seeing more of these plants being built here across the Northern Plains, across other areas, I mean, it's all just, it's got to add to the excitement, doesn't it, Scott?
It really is. I mean, we're celebrating now 30 years for the biodiesel industry here in the next year. And we've grown from a nascent industry to being 3 billion gallons of biodiesel and renewable diesel being consumed now across the country. And I think what you're seeing is all sorts of announcements more about renewable diesel production from those traditional petroleum refineries. But now they're partnering with traditional ag companies and generating growth on the crush side as well. We could see 30% additional crush capacity here in the next 2 to 3 years.
And I have to think on the demand side, I mean, that's going to, you know, definitely improve domestic demand for soybeans and just for our growers here across the country.
Yeah, I think if you're a soybean farmer today across the U.S., you can be less and less concerned about what China is or is not going to do. We can keep those value-added products, that not just that oil, but that protein, and use that now here in the U.S. to lower cost on animal feeds, to grow animal agriculture here in the U.S. So it's a chain reaction for all the value-added products.
And it's not something to where China necessarily is going to go out of our markets by any means, because they are just massive in our markets. But I would say maybe it lessens our dependence on what China does on that export front to a certain extent.
Well, I agree. I mean, options are always a good thing. And so whether or not those options are still available on whole beans, you know, that's great. Or whether you want those value-added products, that additional meal and protein, that additional oil for biodiesel, renewable diesel, and now sustainable aviation fuels, options should make everyone happy.
Now, of course, a lot of talk policy-wise. RFS is just there's a lot of noise, I think, surrounding the RFS and what the EPA is going to do, what the administration is going to do. A lot of groups going back to bat again for the RFS. So, and talk about where things stand right now, Scott, and just your thoughts on what is currently going on with the RFS.
Well, I think renewable fuels are, you know, we often say, you know, we are a policy fuel, and that's not going to change. So every administration has a different philosophy, and most certainly the next administration will change something or another as well. But right now, the options available to us keep growing and growing. As I mentioned, we're a 3 billion gallon a year industry. The vision of clean fuels is that we're going to grow to be 6 billion gallons by 2030. And that's fueled in part with all of these renewable diesel announcements, sustainable aviation fuel, but not just at the federal level and the RFS, but what we're seeing now are state energy policies. The West Coast and California with their low carbon fuel standard. Next door in Minnesota, they've got the biodiesel mandate that's now at B20. We're seeing strong consumption incentives in Iowa, Missouri. You've got state bills right now. Illinois is working on a revised bill. And we're also seeing new mandates, new incentives on the East Coast, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic states for heating oil applications. We've got a new mandate just signed by the new governor in New York that will mandate 5% biodiesel in heating oil moving forward, and that's going to ramp up over time.
And a lot of the Midwest states, of course, leading that charge, not to mention the East Coast, West Coast states that you touched on there as well. Scott, there's just a There's a lot going on, a lot of excitement, but any final thoughts you want to share with us here today?
I think particularly our message here at the Northern Corn and Soy Expo is that if you're a farmer today, particularly row crops, corn, especially soybeans today, the future is bright. No predictions, as far as pricing goes, but we're looking at pretty good pricing today. And our outlook for volumes is going to maintain that high demand over the next decade.
Well, with that, Scott Fenwick with Clean Fuels Alliance America, we appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us here today at the Northern Corn and Soybean Expo. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And again, that's Scott Fenwick, Technical Director with Clean Fuels Alliance America. Again, we are live here at the Northern Corn and Soybean Expo at the Fargo Dome in Fargo, North Dakota. Great event put on here today by the different commodity organizations with corn and soy here in North Dakota. And weather outside, not too great. It definitely impacted attendance just a little bit, but still a lot of great folks having great conversations here today in Fargo. Joining us now as we wrap up the show, Sarah Engstrom. We're talking cybersecurity, and she is with CHS. Sarah, thanks for taking the time to join us today. How are you?
Yeah, you too. I'm doing really well. Thanks.
I appreciate the time, Sarah. Let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity. And we were chatting just before we went on the air. Obviously, the last year, there's been quite a few data breaches and hacks of different ag companies and farms, and a lot of worry around this topic, and it's really kind of come to the forefront here just in the last year or so.
It has. I have my theories on why recently, and a couple of them are, working in a pandemic, which is now an endemic. A lot of companies didn't have remote access figured out for their organization and sent people home and then allowed them access to their email remotely. And I think that those types of scenarios have certainly made it easier for these bad actors to go after companies who haven't been able to invest in the technology or the resources to help combat it.
Well, I think another thing, too, is a lot of these bad actors are looking at agriculture. It's a very vital piece of infrastructure here in the U.S. and worldwide for that matter. But here in the U.S., it's something that they're thinking, oh, well, this is a piece that I can, try to take out a little chink in the armor of infrastructure here across the country.
Yeah, I've been at CHS for 6 years now, and certainly financial institutions and a lot of organizations that have been led by compliance requirements have been investing in this space for quite a while, and agriculture didn't have some of those mandates that maybe made it happen for the company to invest in people and process and technology. And unfortunately, those bad actors are taking advantage of that. And now's the time for any organization, any size, to, one, be looking at cybersecurity insurance coverage. And that gives you somewhat of a playbook or a checklist of things to implement. And then two, just really ensuring that you're investing in resources. And it can't just really be one IT guy anymore. There really needs to be some just thought leadership and risk planning and scenario. And I do say it's not if, it's when. And so planning for when that bad event occurs, how your organization will respond.
Well, I know a couple tips you gave there, and obviously our major ag companies, they have the big IT teams, et cetera, and they have people that are working on this for them. But thinking about our small family farms, our smaller agriculture organizations who maybe it's a few people and this and that, what are some other tips you would have for those folks to try and tighten up some of their cybersecurity?
Yeah, first and foremost, I would look at how people are remotely connecting to applications. And so if you're serving up email access to the internet for your organization, implementing two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, no matter what kind of device or network your company is using, ensure that you're applying patches and keeping good hygiene on your IT equipment. It's not a just set it and let it ride nowadays. It's to, quarterly, if not more, periodic patches and updates to your Windows devices, your Apple devices, no matter what kind of devices you have. And then two, really to secure your Wi-Fi. And the last point or tip I'll say is use password managers to help manage your passwords. We all know that we have a lot of different passwords, and it's important to use a third-party product to help you manage them all.
I think about a lot of people might have multi-factor authentication on their social media profiles. Well, if you're going to do that, you should also have it on your financial profiles and a lot of your key infrastructure, because that's way more important than a social media profile. But just a comparison there. I mean, it's something that you can't skimp on. You have to take it seriously.
We live in this world now where multi-factor is just, it's table stakes. And I think it's really important too, you made the distinction between social versus like banking or some other personal applications. Really important just to think about rotating different passwords for those different types of accounts. Social media certainly is a haven for these bad actors. And so kind of thinking about things in a compartmentalized way, and also increasing controls on things that are accessing your banking information is very important in this day and age.
And I'm sure your work with CHS and the things that you and the company do to help out your customers as well on that end, when they're using your products, of course, you guys are always investing in and using the latest and greatest technology there as well, aren't you?
We are, yeah. And I can't necessarily provide third-party resources that might help a smaller institution. But for those that are medium or mid-sized companies, CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, they provide free services, whether that's tabletopping this bad event and thinking about who, what, where, when, and why around an actual cybersecurity incident, to doing vulnerability scanning on your network to ensure that they're maybe identifying those weak links before the bad actors do. There are, institutions out there that are really trying to help.
Plenty of things to consider, plenty of things to remember, to take care of, to protect your cybersecurity on your operation. Sarah, great to talk to you today. Any final thoughts you have for us?
Just stay safe out there and keep asking questions and, spending time investing and learning about this particular topic. I know it can be really intimidating, but I just think it's not going away anytime soon. And the more we talk about it and share lessons learned and share third parties that have been helping us through challenging times, it's a team sport. We're all in this together.
With that, Sarah Engstrom with CHS. Thanks for joining us here at the Northern Quarter Soybean Expo. We appreciate the time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
And again, that's Sarah Engstrom with CHS, and that is going to do it for Market Talk here on this Monday. Again, no markets today. We'll get back to trading in the overnight session tonight and into Tuesday. We'll see what the market trade does for us here, as a lot of things we're paying attention to. We'll be talking with the guys at agmarket.net coming up tomorrow on the show. Find us online, markettalkag.com. That's going to do it for the show on this Monday, February 21st. I'm your host, Jesse Allen. Have a great evening.